And welcome back to my channel where I am revisiting some of my earlier class related videos. Within this video, we will be picking up where we left off with advancing our Cleric Class character and go through levels 11 through to 20. I will be sure to cover all of the features that our character is going to gain and be sure to point out any issues that might crop up over the course of these changes if there happen to be any. We left off our Cleric at level 10 at the end of the last video. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare to level up to level 11. And there are a couple of things that we are going to gain. The first is going to be that at level 11, we gain access to level 6 spell slots. This means we'll be able to prepare level 6 spells. Additionally, we also see an increase in the level of the undead that we can now destroy. It goes from challenge rating 1 to challenge rating 2, and this means that when we turn undead, we'll be able to destroy anything that is a challenge rating of 2 or lower. So I'm going to go ahead and level up our character and then be sure that I choose our level 6 spell. Go with that, make sure that nothing else is required, and then go ahead and commit that change. I will then want to ensure that our character has that spell prepared. So I'm going to go ahead and select this, and apparently I didn't prepare the previous one either. That is fine. Once again, the Destroy Undead feature is not giving us anything new beyond an increase in existing capabilities. With our Turn Undead feature, up till now we've been able to destroy level 1 or challenge rating 1 creatures or lower, because there's not really a level that is equivalent to a player character level. And with challenge rating 1 creatures, we used to be able to destroy things like ghouls and specters, plus skeletons, zombies, and the equivalent kinds of undead. With this increase, we are now gaining the ability to also destroy ghasts, poltergeists, and will-o'-the-wisps, as well as similar undead creatures of that same challenge rating. The Dungeon Master is going to be the final indicator, if you will, when it comes to the kinds of creatures that will be destroyed. So if you've run up against an undead your character has never seen before, yet they are a challenge rating 2 kind of creature, you'll be able to destroy them and still not know what they were. Cleric level 12 sees our character gain another ability score improvement, and to round off those examples that I've run through thus far, I'm simply going to take 2 ability scores and increase each of them by 1 point. And that'll bring our wisdom skill, if you will, or ability I should say, up to 20, which will max out our capabilities here. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this. I'm going to select the ability score improvement. I'm going to go to stats, select wisdom, and then I'm going to just quickly choose Constitution for the time being. As we went with an ability score improvement, there are no stats or features that we're going to gain here. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that. You may have noticed that I didn't select a spell. We are still gaining the ability to prepare a spell, but the one thing I want to point out before I actually go through the process of doing that is that at level 12, you're not gaining any additional spell slots. You have the exact same number of spell slots that you had at level 11. This is a pattern that is going to remain in place for the next few levels, and that is simply to balance out the total number of spells that your character can cast, while at the same time giving you the ability to prepare additional spells for levels you already have the ability to cast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select a spell from our cleric list here that is level 6, and simply add that to our list of known spells. I'm going to go with Blade Barrier. That's always a useful one. There. So while we never gained a new spell slot, we definitely gained the ability to prepare an additional spell because that part doesn't change. In addition to the ability to prepare a spell that we gained because of our level increase, we are also gaining the ability to prepare an additional spell because our wisdom score increased. So you're going to want to go ahead and actually make sure that you do that. I'm going to go ahead and pop open our spellcasting listing here and then open up our spells. Now, because we gained a level 6 spell, I'm going to go ahead and add in an additional one. So I have Blade Barrier and True Seeing right now. I'm going to go ahead and pick Heal for the time being, and then I'm going to ensure that I prepare that spell. Cleric level 13 is going to see an increase in our character's proficiency bonus capabilities here, as well as gaining access to level 7 spells. So once again, in this particular case, we're gaining an additional spell slot, gaining an additional proficiency bonus point, but we're not gaining anything else. So I'm going to go ahead, level our character up. This time I will select a spell as part of our selection here. Resurrection is always useful. There we go. Commit that. And then I'm going to explain what happens with this proficiency bonus increase. The way the proficiency bonus increase works here is that any saving throw that we happen to be proficient in, which in this case is wisdom and charisma, as well as any ability scores that we're proficient in, are going to see an additional point increase here in the total value of what we'll actually be able to succeed for a bonus whenever we make a roll. So here we're adding plus 10. Here we're now adding plus 5. It was plus 4 prior. Things like that. On top of that, weapons that you're proficient in are going to see an increase in the attack roll here. And we are proficient in the mace here, hence why the star is here. And any saving throw that is required to be triggered by a spell here, so for example, this blade barrier requires someone to have a dexterity 18 saving throw in order to suffer half damage. Prior level, that was a 17. This is now an 18, so the proficiency bonus comes into play at this particular point in time. So beyond that, all you really have to ensure that you do is prepare your actual spells that you just selected. So in this case, that was Resurrection, is now prepared and ready for use. There's nothing else really that you have to do for level 13. It's quite a quick level to deal with. At Cleric level 14, we're going to be gaining an additional increase in the challenge rating for undead creatures that we can now destroy. This is obviously in addition to an additional spell that we can prepare. So let me go ahead and deal with that side of things first. I'm going to select another level 7 spell here. And that will deal with that once we get it prepared. There we go. And now I will run through what changes in relation to Destroy Undead. Once again, the challenge rating increases from 2 to 3. And this now means that you can destroy creatures like wights, mummies, and other kinds of undead that are of that class. Additionally, you're now gaining the capabilities of being able to destroy some of the lowest levels of the vampiric kinds of creatures that you can bump up against. In this particular case, it's only a vampiric mist. You're never actually going to really be able to destroy a vampire outright, unlike how sometimes that is portrayed in different kinds of books and movies. Whenever you go through and try to attempt to turn that particular creature, you're still able to turn vampires, but you're never going to be able to get to the point of being able to destroy a master vampire. However, some of their offspring, if you will, or the variations of things that they've created, are things that you can destroy, this mist being one of them. At Cleric level 15, beyond the additional preparation capabilities, the real factor that comes into play here is we are now gaining access to level 8 spells. There is, however, a pattern that I would like to point out. When it comes to the total number of available spells, the earlier level spells are going to have the highest selection capabilities. So levels 1, 2, and 3 have a fairly large selection of spells that are available to you. Level 4 has quite a bit less, but level 5 has a bit of an increase there. Level 6 is less again, level 7 is less than level 6, and levels 8 and 9 are equal to each other, but are less than level 7. And the reason for that is that higher level spells are much more difficult to cast, create, learn, and understand, so there's a less of a selection as a result of that, and you actually gain less spell slots at those higher levels, so you're not going to be casting as many of these overly powerful spells. And that's always been the nature with Dungeons & Dragons. However, there are supplements out there that do add additional spells to these groupings here. And unless your Dungeon Master is running with those particular supplements installed, you're not going to have as large a selection as you would in the earlier levels when it comes to the actual spells. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and level our character up and then select our level 8 spell. I will go with Earthquake in this case. Other than preparing that spell, there isn't anything else that we have to deal with respect to this level. At Cleric level 16, the only thing our character is gaining is an ability score improvement. There's no additional increases in the number of spells here because it's equal to what level 15 was. And there's no additional increases in the number of cantrips or proficiency bonus points that we're gaining here. So those are the proficiency points. These are the number of cantrips. And it should be clear by now that these adjustments are going to change your character based on the choices that you make. And this is the trade-off when you're dealing with ability score improvements versus feat selections. Selecting a feat each time your character gains an ability score improvement means your character might be getting stronger through the things that they can do, not improving what they already have, unless a feat is specifically modifying something that your character can already do, but is instead making it better. Whereas increasing your stats is going to improve your ability scores and saving throws that make use of those modifiers of the stats that you chose to increase. As well, if you decide to increase your wisdom ability scores, then you'll gain strength in some of your spells and the number of spells that your character can prepare at the same time, as long as they were also affected by this. Despite this, it generally works out to be fairly well balanced unless you completely tilt your character in one particular direction or another, i.e., for each ability score improvement, you chose nothing but feats, or for each ability score improvement, you chose to increase your ability scores. Generally, I found it more useful to use, say, 3 of the ability score improvements to gain increases in my ability scores themselves, and then use the remaining increases as feat selections in order to be able to add some additional capabilities to my character or improve capabilities to make the ones that I already have a little bit more efficient. This translates into a fairly well-balanced character that can handle multiple situations while still gaining a few feats that amp up some of my existing features or add new capabilities, as I stated before. But that's just how I'd like to play my characters. How you handle this situation is going to be different each time you play a character, but eventually you're going to settle into a pattern that you like, and that's perfectly fine. And you also might end up in a position where there are a handful of feats that you can't do without, and thus you always select those each time you level through your characters. So let's go ahead and advance our character. And in this particular case, I am once again just simply going to choose an ability score here to improve. I will use this to point something out about a constitution increase. And I'm going to increase that by 1 point. And I'm going to bring charisma up by 1 point. Not going to gain anything, but whatever. There we go. Oops, I forgot to select a spell. Hang on 1 second. Now, level 16, we are still gaining level 8 spells. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that open. I always like to minimize it just to make it easier to gain access to. That was Earthquake, so I'm going to go with an anti-magic field. And then prepare that. Now, the thing that I wanted to point out is related to our charisma score. We actually have gained an increase in the modifier here, which means that we are now missing hit points for our character. Whenever your constitution modifier increases, you're going to gain the number of hit points that is equal to your level multiplied by the difference in the modifier score. So in our case, this was a +2 prior to our increase. It is now a +3. That means our difference is 1 point. This means that we're going to add 16 hit points to our character to ensure that we add those missing hit points. That means that I need to bring our character up to 148 hit points total. And all you do is you just simply select the box and modify it as you need to. If somehow we had managed to push this up by an additional point so that it was a +4, this one here, so that it had gone from +2 to +4, then we would double the number of hit points that we're gaining here to 32, simply because it's the multiplication of 16 times that difference here, and then we add that to here. It's very difficult to get a +2 change in your ability score when you go through and do something like this, but it's not impossible because there are some feats that you could add that actually gain it. There are also some high-level changes that occur that can go ahead and add that and make that change. It's all going to come down to the different kinds of characters and classes that are played. At Cleric level 17, your character is going to gain their last increase when it comes to the challenge rating for the Destroy Undead feature. In addition to that, you're gaining a domain feature here, which I'm not going to be covering in this video. And this is in addition to any particular spells that you can now prepare, which at this particular level, you are now unlocking the ability to gain access to level 9 spells. So let's go ahead and increase our character's level and add that spell into our character. So I'm going to go with level 9. Select Mass Heal, and maybe I'll choose True Resurrection on our next level. I'm going to commit that change, And then we're going to take a look at the change that occurred with Destroy Undead, or Destroy Undead, I should say. Before I get into covering this, the one thing that I do want to point out is we are now gaining our last proficiency bonus increase. So once again, any of our proficient saving throws and ability scores are going to see their increases, and any particular saving throws that we are going to force other creatures to make are now also going to see an increase there. And any modifiers that we have for any particular weapons that we're proficient in when it comes to attacking them, we will see an increase in that as well. With respect to the Destroy Undead adjustment here, we are now gaining access to challenge rating for lower level creatures. That means you can now destroy things like ghosts, banshees, flame skulls, and other powerful creatures that have this particular challenge rating for their difficulty. And because this is the final increase that we're going to gain with Destroy Undead, we will not be able to destroy any other type of undead that might have a higher level of challenge rating. We can still turn them, and the ability to turn them has definitely improved as our proficiency bonus has improved, as well as our wisdom modifier, simply because of the fact that those bonus points, if you will, get applied to that turn undead saving throw that they are now required to save. So in this case, it's now a DC 19 check. This means there really shouldn't be any undead that you can't turn at this level, although there is still a little bit of a difficulty factor that scales with this, so some of those particular creatures might have the ability to gain higher bonuses, thus pushing their rolls up into the 20s. But it is definitely far easier to turn undead at this point. Cleric level 18 is an important level because this is the level where your character begins to gain spell slots per level again, though it starts with a single level increase, or spell slot increase I should say, at level 5 spells. We do also gain some additional spell slots in the last 2 levels, which we'll cover once we get there. It's also the level where your character is going to gain the final increase in the number of channel divinity uses that your character is going to have. And this is significant because it now increases your total number of uses between rests from 2 to 3. And remember, that includes a short rest. This means that you can actually have 3 uses between every single rest your character makes. So I'm going to go ahead and level our character up. I'm going to go ahead and choose another level 9 spell. So in this case, I'm going to choose True Resurrection. And then I'm going to prepare that down here to the bottom. And apparently I didn't prepare that in the previous level. My apologies. The last thing that we'll have to deal with, though, before we can move on to level 19, is increasing the number of uses here. And if you recall, we don't do this through the preparation tab here because you can see that this is set to 0. We also need to adjust this, and I kept forgetting to do that apparently. We make the adjustment here, and that's in this magnifying glass, not this magnifying glass. And that's because this is where we're setting the number of rests that our character has to complete, because we will be sharing this with other channel divinity features that we're gaining through our domain. And now we can actually go through and execute up to 3 uses of Turn Undead between rests. At Cleric level 19, we are gaining an additional spell slot for level 6 base spells, but we are also gaining our final ability score improvement. Because of that, this is going to be a relatively quick level to go through and deal with. And I'm just going to go ahead and select a stat again. And I'm going to bring up my charisma up to a 19 in order to unlock that capability there for saving throws if there happen to be any. I'm then going to commit that. So we now have a +4 here, which means we now have a 10 in our saving throw. I'm then going to go ahead and use this class feature here to gain access to a spell and add that to our character sheet. So let's see. I've never had Find the Path, so I'll go ahead and add that. And Find the Path should have dropped down here into level 6. There it is there. We just need to prepare it. And that's it. That's everything that we have to deal with. Oops, I did want to close the character sheet for level 19. And finally, at Cleric level 20, we will now have the means to make use of Divine Intervention without having to roll a percentile die. We can simply make the call, our god is going to respond to us, but then we have to go through and complete a rest. I think it's a week-long rest in order to be able to actually make use of this feature again. We are also gaining access to our final spell slot increase, so we have once again unlocked an additional level 7 spell slot. I'm going to go ahead and increase this, level 20. I'm going to go ahead and select a spell, and in this case, I'm going to make use of level 7. Do I have regenerate already? I do not. I'm going to go ahead and, oops, I keep forgetting you can't do that anymore. Commit that change, and then I'm going to go ahead and prepare this. Now that was level 7. Prepare. There we go. With respect to divine intervention, it's the last paragraph here that you'll want to pay attention to. The only change that comes into play is that, unlike your earlier levels, you no longer have to go through and roll a dice for percentile dice and achieve a level lower than level 19, because that would have been the last level that you could have done that, in order to actually have your god intervene. This part here, however, will still apply, because we're now automatically gaining intervention from our god. Every time we use this, we won't be able to use it again for 7 days. Of course, this assumes that the Dungeon Master is tracking time as part of their campaign. Some DMs will be a little bit flexible on this simply because they don't want you to use it too frequently. However, it is something that will be a restriction, and there are some DMs that will just simply go through and say, nope, you can't use this. And then at some point they'll say, okay, yes, you can now use this if you wish. But that completes all of the levels for our cleric. The base cleric class is quite powerful on its own, and while it's lighter on feature gains than other base classes, this is countered by the spells that your character is going to gain, as well as the features gained through the domain. We will see in the domain-related videos that a cleric actually gains more through their domain than any other class does by their own class specialization, when you take into account things like their domain spells and other domain-specific features. None of this diminishes the cleric in any way, however, as they are generally considered the most useful of all classes out there with respect to party survival, especially in campaigns that have time limitations to them, meaning that a party has X number of days or months to complete an adventure, otherwise something bad is going to happen at a cataclysmic scale, for example. A perfect example of that is actually the Tomb of Annihilation campaign. However, this does complete our cleric space class, and it's now time for me to move on to the remaining domain-specific videos. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.